A new study published in the April 2023 Nature Medical Journal reveals the discovery of 3 unknown areas of the sensory motor cortex in the brain. These areas may be key to understanding mysteries of the body-mind connection. The study shows that parts of the brain area that control movement are plugged into networks involved in thinking and planning, and in control of involuntary bodily functions such as blood pressure and heartbeat. This was a large study, comprising data from nearly 50,000 individuals. Understanding the importance of the sensory motor tracts in the brain is central to the work in Hanna somatics. In the book The Body of Life by Thomas Hanna, he explains, the arrangement of nerve cells in the motor tracts of the cortex represents the human body from bottom to top. It is as if a little man were stretched out along these tracts, and for this reason it has come to be called the sensory homunculus. The word homunculus is Latin for a little man or little person. Thomas Hanna explains, if we were to run a lightly charged filament across this neuronal keyboard, the muscles and senses would be activated in a rational, sequential manner. There would be a rising contraction of the muscles and an ascending arpeggio of sensations. Thomas Hanna goes on to say, it is a most rational arrangement, as orderly in its layout as are the ascending keys on a piano keyboard. In fact, it is quite similar. Just as pressing down on the white key of middle C activates the striking of the C string in the piano, so does stimulation of a neuron in these tracts activate the corresponding muscle cell or sensory cell in the body. Looking closer at the little man, we begin to notice some unusual features of this neural body. The first and perhaps most obvious feature is the enormous space allotted to the hands and face and the small amount allotted to the legs and trunk of the body. Although the legs and trunk are a major portion of the bodily structure, they are a minor portion of the neural structure, a fact that puts us in a better position to judge which bodily functions are the most significant from a neural point of view. In viewing the homunculus, we are, to a large extent, viewing the functional human being as contrasted with the structural human being. In a rather exact sense, Thomas Hanna points out that we are getting nearer to what the living human body is like if viewed from the inside. We rely primarily on our sensory processes to regulate ourselves as well as to interact with the world around us. The sensoromotor homunculus is a creature made for perception and action. The research findings published in the Nature journal found that, instead of a continuous head-to-toe representation of body movements, the homunculus is actually sliced into 3 sections, one for the feet, another for the hands, and a third for the mouth. In the integrate-isolate model, the regions for foot, hand, and mouth fine motor skills are organized somatotopically as 3 concentric functional zones with distal parts of the effector, toes, fingers and tongue, at the center and proximal ones, knee, shoulder and larynx, on the perimeter. In addition to these, there are 3 mysterious areas within the homunculus whose significance was not understood. Historically, while these areas had been observed before, scientists considered them not significant since stimulations to these areas did not elicit body movement. Based on fMRI data, scientists argue that these areas, referred to as inner effector regions in the primary motor cortex, play a role in whole-body action planning, rather than corresponding to single body parts. These areas are thought to have an important role in executing complex movements and regulating internal organs and appear important to the activation of the midsection, the somatic center of the body. In addition, these action body regions can become active when someone is only imagining making movements. The most interesting finding is that these intereffector regions are functionally connected to multiple regions of the cingulo-opercular network, which is critical for physiological control, arousal, and pain. This relationship in particular may be the missing link to the connection between body and mind. The somatocognitive action network integrates body control, both motor and autonomic, and action planning. This system may have first developed in humans to regulate complex motor skills such as coordinating breathing for speech and integrating hand, body, and eye movement for tool use. The network appears to be used today in pre-action anticipatory postural, breathing, cardiovascular and arousal changes such as shoulder tension, increased heart rate, or physical nervousness and excitement such as butterflies in the stomach. In The Body of Life, Thomas Hanna explains, the entire brain of an adult male weighs something in the neighborhood of 50 ounces or about 1,400 grams. The brain is a colossal organ. It is an aggregate of some 12 billion neurons, most of which, 9 billion, are concentrated in the top layer, the cerebral cortex. In the center of these nerve cells, like the main pole of a tent upon which all else hangs, stands the sensorimotor system. The sensorimotor system, Thomas Hanna explains, is a massive assemblage of nerve cells united in performing one dual function, moving the body in coordination while integrating the sensory information that it receives from the body. The sensorimotor system's location in the cerebral cortex means that we, as humans, can consciously and voluntarily control our actions and reprogram the resting level of our muscles. This has always been central to understanding the efficacy of Hanna somatics. What is new, however, is an added understanding of the homunculus map in the sensory motor cortex and its interrelationship with the rest of the brain and therefore, the body. These three colored spots, once thought of as unimportant blank spots because they did not directly affect movement in the body, now have been found to have an important purpose. Researchers have found that these three areas connect to other areas of the brain involved in thinking, planning, control of basic bodily functions, and to more complex combinations of both fine and gross motor movement. In the Nature article, scientists explain, while it was already known that the sensory motor cortex was essential for moving muscles of the body, other unexplained phenomena, such as why anxiety makes people want to pace back and forth, why stimulating the vagus nerve, which regulates internal organ functions such as digestion and heart rate, may alleviate depression, or why people who exercise regularly report a more positive outlook on life. These and other mind-body phenomena have remained a scientific mystery until now. Now we know how our body and mind are directly linked together via the sensory motor cortex, which is constantly communicating with the thinking and planning parts of our brain. And the thinking and planning parts of our brain are wired to work directly with our sensory motor system to regulate and control our basic body functions and gross and fine motor movements. Researchers believe this interlinking may have evolved from a simpler system meant to integrate movement with physiology so that, for instance, we don't pass out when we stand up. The system then became more complex as we needed to do increasingly complicated motor-related planning for difficult human tasks. Today we live in a global world with complicated politics and constant strains on our minds and bodies. We tend to blame our bodies for not being fit enough, and our minds for being too weak to withstand the psychological stresses in our lives. Medical doctors take care of our bodies, and therapists help us with our minds. But this dichotomy between the body and the mind is not only unnecessary, it goes against science. As we have seen in this new research on the expanded role of the sensory motor cortex, our minds and bodies work as one soma. Thomas Hanna, in his book, The Body of Life, defines the soma as the living body in its wholeness. He explains that the soma arose as a system that always strives to achieve stability and balance, a task that takes place in time, and is never complete. A soma is neither static or solid, it is changeable and supple, and is constantly adapting to its environment. The soma is not a thing or an objective body, but rather is a process. A process which science is slowly revealing to be more and more somatic in nature. The first-person perspective of somatic experience, once thought of as quite separate from the third-person view of medical science, may be merging to form a new paradigm together, revealing what we have always known in our hearts: that the body and mind connection is both verifiable and real.